My name is Zethkari, and I come from the warrior moon of Veltar, where we are bred for battle from the moment we can hold a weapon. Our claws can slice through steel, our hide can deflect plasma bolts, and our strength can crush bones with a simple squeeze. For 300 cycles, I had known only victory on a dozen battlefields across the galaxy. I was elite, feared, unstoppable until the day I met the humans, the Galactic Defense Coalition had called for volunteers to join a special operations unit. The mission briefing was classified, but the pay was exceptional and the glory promised to be legendary. Warriors from across known space answered the call. There were the crystalline Jektari with their energy manipulation abilities, the four-armed Bruthan with their incredible reach and coordination, and several other species I recognized from previous campaigns. Then I saw them. 3 small, pink-skinned creatures standing quietly in the corner. They were tiny compared to the rest of us, barely reaching my chest, with no visible natural weapons or armor. Their skin looked soft and vulnerable, like it would tear at the slightest touch. They had small teeth, weak-looking limbs, and their eyes seemed to dart around nervously. I approached the nearest one, a female with short brown fur growing only from her head. "Excuse me, small one, but I think you may be in the wrong location. The civilian quarters are several levels down." She looked up at me with those strange, small eyes and smiled. It was not a threatening display like the baring of fangs I was used to. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, Human Expeditionary Forces. She extended one of her tiny appendages toward me. I stared at the gesture, confused. "I do not understand." "It's called a handshake. A greeting between warriors." Her voice carried a confidence that seemed impossible given her obvious physical limitations. Carefully, afraid I might accidentally crush her delicate limb, I took her hand in mine. Her grip was surprisingly firm, though I could have snapped every bone with the slightest pressure. "I am Zethkari of the Veltar 3rd Assault Legion. But surely there has been some mistake." "This is a combat mission, no mistake. This came from one of the other humans, a large male with dark skin and scars across his face. Master Chief Jackson Williams, and these are my people. We've been briefing alien forces for the past 6 months on what you're about to face." The third human, smaller and younger than the others, looked up from a strange device he was manipulating with incredible dexterity. The Devourers don't play by conventional rules. Size and strength mean nothing to them. Right, Corporal Martinez? Commander Velthan, a massive Bruthan with decorations covering his 4 arms, called the briefing to order. The holographic display showed a planet called Kepler 442b, where an entire research colony had gone dark 3 weeks ago. The last transmission mentioned creatures that seemed to phase in and out of reality, consuming both matter and energy. "These beings," Velthan's voice boomed across the room, "have destroyed 14 military outposts. Standard weapons appear to have limited effectiveness. They seem to feed on fear itself, growing stronger as their opponents become more terrified." The Jektari warrior beside me, Quillanth, clicked his crystalline limbs together anxiously. "How does one fight fear itself?" That's when Staff Sergeant Rodriguez stood up. "You don't fight the fear. You acknowledge it, accept it, and then do your job anyway. That's what courage actually is." Several aliens in the room made sounds of derision. Courage meant fearlessness, the absence of terror in the face of danger. This was basic warrior philosophy across every species I had encountered. "With respect," I said. "Courage is the elimination of fear through superior training and preparation." The human female shook her head. "That's not courage. That's just confidence. Real courage is being scared out of your mind and still moving forward because people are counting on you." Commander Velthan raised one of his massive hands. "The humans speak from experience. They are the only species to have survived direct contact with the Devourers. 3 times. This information stunned the room into silence. These fragile-looking creatures had faced the galaxy's newest threat and lived to tell about it. Master Chief Williams stepped forward. "First contact was 18 months ago. Lost half my squad, but we learned their patterns. Second time, we knew what to expect. Only lost 2. Third time? He paused, his eyes growing distant. Third time we actually drove them back. How? The question came from multiple aliens simultaneously. By being human, Corporal Martinez said simply. They feed on fear, right? But fear isn't our weakness. It's our fuel. When we're afraid, we get creative, desperate, angry. We start thinking outside normal parameters. I found this concept disturbing. You intentionally maintain fear during combat? We don't maintain it, Rodriguez explained. We use it. Fear makes us faster, stronger, more alert. It floods our system with chemical enhancers that boost our physical capabilities beyond their normal limits. Most species try to eliminate fear because it clouds judgment. But controlled fear, acknowledged fear, can make you superhuman. The transport ship Valdris departed the Coalition station 6 hours later. During the journey, I found myself observing the humans more closely. They did not boast about past victories or display their weapons like the other warriors. Instead, they sat quietly, checking and rechecking their equipment with methodical precision. Their weapons were strange. Primitive-looking projectile launchers that seemed inadequate compared to our plasma rifles and energy weapons. When I mentioned this to Martinez, he smiled and patted his rifle affectionately. This baby fires chemically propelled metal slugs at 3 times the speed of sound. No energy signature for them to absorb, no plasma field to disrupt. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. But surely it lacks the stopping power of modern weapons? Rodriguez overheard and laughed. These rounds can punch through 6 inches of hardened steel. We've modified them with depleted uranium cores and hollow point expansion chambers. Trust me, they stop whatever they hit. The more I learned about human weapons, the more confused I became. Everything they used was deliberately primitive, chemically powered rather than energy-based. Their armor was layered metal and ceramic instead of force fields. Even their communication devices relied on radio waves rather than quantum entanglement. Why do you reject advanced technology? I asked Williams during one of our conversations. We don't reject it, he corrected. We just learn not to rely on it exclusively. Energy weapons can be absorbed, force fields can be disrupted, quantum communications can be jammed. But you can't absorb the kinetic energy of a chunk of metal traveling at Mach 3. Can't disrupt ceramic armor plates. Can't jam a radio frequency unless you know exactly which one we're using. This seems inefficient. Maybe, but it's reliable. When everything else fails, when the enemy has counters for your fancy tech, having something simple and brutal to fall back on can save your life. As we approached Kepler 442b, the ship's sensors detected massive electromagnetic disturbances coming from the planet's surface. The energy readings were unlike anything in our databases, and the ship's AI kept reporting system malfunctions that corrected themselves moments later. They're testing our defenses, Martinez observed calmly, probing for weaknesses in our technology. Sure enough, several aliens began reporting problems with their equipment. Energy weapons flickered on and off, armor systems showed random error messages, and communication devices produced nothing but static. The humans, however, seemed completely unaffected. Their primitive equipment continued functioning perfectly while our advanced systems struggled against whatever force emanated from the planet below. How are your devices still operational? Commander Velthan demanded. Because they're too simple to interfere with, Rodriguez explained. Hard to disrupt something that doesn't rely on complex energy matrices or quantum processing. The landing was rough. Something in the planet's atmosphere seemed to actively resist our approach, buffeting the ship with invisible forces that made our pilot work twice as hard to maintain control. When we finally touched down on the surface, the electromagnetic interference was so intense that most of our advanced equipment was completely useless. The landscape around the research facility was wrong in ways that hurt to look at. Trees grew at impossible angles, their bark seeming to shift and crawl when viewed directly. The sky flickered between day and night at random intervals, and shadows moved independently of the objects that cast them. Stay close to the humans, Velthan ordered quietly. Follow their lead. As we approached the facility, I noticed that the humans moved differently than the rest of us. Where we advanced in standard military formation, weapons ready and scanning for threats, they seemed to flow across the terrain like liquid, always in motion. Never presenting a static target, Rodriguez noticed my observation. Constant movement, she explained in a whisper. The devourers lock onto fixed positions. Keep moving, keep changing direction, never let them get a solid read on your location. The first sign of the devourers came as a sound that was not quite a sound, more like a vibration that traveled through bone and nerve rather than air. Several of the alien warriors immediately raised their weapons, scanning for targets. Don't, Williams hissed urgently. Don't look for them directly. Use periphery. The massive devourer in the laboratory center was unlike the others we had encountered. Where the previous entities had been shadows and suggestion, this one possessed terrible solidity. Its form shifted constantly, but always remained present, always real, always watching us with eyes that burned with hungry intelligence. Primary entity, Williams whispered, his voice barely audible through our primitive radio communication. The one coordinating all the others. Take this down, and the rest should scatter. The creature spoke then, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through our bones rather than our ears. The words were not in any language I recognized, but somehow I understood them perfectly. Such delicious terror, it said, savoring each syllable. I have fed well on this world, but you bring such variety. The crystalline one's fear tastes of shattered hopes. The four-armed leader fears failure above all else. And the scaled warrior. It focused on me specifically. You fear losing control, becoming weak, proving inadequate? It was right. Despite everything I had learned from the humans, that deep terror still existed within me. The fear that I might not be the unstoppable warrior I believed myself to be. That I might fail when others depended on me. But then Rodriguez spoke. Her voice cutting through the creature's psychological assault like a blade. Yeah, we're all scared, so what? Fear doesn't define us, asshole. What we do with it does. She raised her weapon and fired, 3 precise shots that struck the entity center mass. The bullets passed through without effect, but the creature recoiled anyway, not from the physical impact, but from the sheer audacity of the attack. Impossible, it hissed. You're tiny, weak, fragile. You should be cowering in terror, feeding me with your despair. Martinez laughed, actually laughed in the face of this cosmic horror. Lady, you picked the wrong species to try that shit on. Humans don't cower. We get pissed off. The creature lashed out with appendages that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could follow. Where they struck the laboratory equipment, matter simply ceased to exist, leaving wounds in reality itself, but the humans were already moving, flowing around the attacks like water around stones. Their primitive weapons spoke in rapid succession, filling the air with the acrid smell of chemical propellant and the sharp crack of supersonic projectiles. The bullets still passed through the creature without physical damage, but each impact caused it to flicker, to become less solid, as if their simple refusal to be intimidated was undermining its very existence. It's a fear construct, Rodriguez called out as she rolled behind cover that probably wouldn't protect her anyway. Physical attacks won't work unless we believe they will work. This should have been a hopeless situation. How does one fight something that exists primarily in the realm of terror and feeds on the very emotion that would make one want to flee from it? The answer came from the most unexpected source. Corporal Martinez, the smallest human on our team, suddenly charged directly at the creature, his weapon firing continuously. You want fear? He shouted as he advanced into what should have been certain death. I'll give you fear? I'm a human being, and that means I'm the most terrifying thing in this galaxy. As he spoke, something extraordinary happened. The creature began to retreat from him, its massive form actually backing away from this tiny, charging human. We're the species that looked at every predator on our homeworld and said, I wonder how that tastes. Martinez continued, his voice rising to a battle cry. We're the ones who saw fire and decided to make it our pet. We looked at every poison on our planet and used it as seasoning. We're so crazy we strapped ourselves to controlled explosions and rode them to other worlds just to see what was out there. The creature's form was becoming increasingly unstable, flickering between solid and shadow as Martinez's words hit it like physical blows. "You think you're scary?" Martinez was now close enough to reach out and touch the entity, though that would probably have been instantly fatal. We invented horror as entertainment. We created fictional monsters scarier than you for fun. We made nightmares into best-selling novels. That's when I understood what was happening. The creature fed on fear, but Martinez was turning that fear around, making the entity afraid of him, of what humans represented. Commander Velthin caught on next. His forearms began moving in combat forms as he advanced alongside Martinez. "They climb mountains because they are there," he added, his voice gaining strength. "They dive to the deepest parts of their oceans. They split atoms to see what happens." Quillith's crystalline form began to resonate with harmonic frequencies as he joined the advance. "They laugh at death itself. They make jokes in the face of annihilation." I found my own voice joining the chorus, my claws extending as I moved forward. "They look at the impossible and call it Tuesday." But it was Williams who delivered the killing blow, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "We're not just humans," he said quietly, his weapon trained on the creature's center mass. "We're human soldiers. We're the ones our own species calls when the monsters need killing. And lady, you're exactly the kind of monster we specialize in." The creature let out a sound that was part scream, part roar, and part dimensional collapse. Its form began to unravel, losing coherence as our combined. Assault of human confidence and alien. Admiration overwhelmed its ability to maintain existence. Through fear alone, but it had one last weapon to deploy. The laboratory suddenly filled with visions of our worst. Fears made manifest. I saw myself failing in battle, my claws broken and useless, my strength inadequate to protect those who depended on me. Quillith's crystal form shattered into 1,000 pieces in his vision. Velthin saw his soldiers dying because of his poor command decisions, and the humans saw things that should have broken them. Rodriguez saw her hometown burning while she was too far away to help. Williams watched his soldiers die one by one, picked off by enemies he couldn't see or fight. Martinez stood over the graves of everyone he had ever cared about, alone in a universe that had taken everything from him, but instead of breaking them, these visions had the opposite effect. "Yeah," Rodriguez said calmly, checking her weapon's ammunition. "That's what we're afraid of. So we make sure it doesn't happen." Williams nodded grimly. "Every nightmare you've shown us is exactly why we do this job. To make sure those things stay nightmares." Martinez actually grinned at his vision of universal loss. "Thanks for the reminder of what we're fighting for, sweetheart. Now let's finish this." The creature's confusion was palpable. It had shown them their worst fears, and instead of being paralyzed, they had been motivated. Instead of being weakened, they had been strengthened. That's when I truly understood what made humans so terrifying to entities like this. They had taken the galaxy's most primal emotion and turned it into fuel for courage. They had made fear itself into a weapon against the things that relied on it. The final assault was almost anticlimactic. Our combined weapons fire, both energy and kinetic, struck the creature simultaneously. But more importantly, our combined will, our refusal to be defeated by fear, our transformation of terror into determination, hit it like a tsunami of pure defiance. The devourer collapsed into itself, its form unraveling like a rope made of shadows. Its final words echoed through the laboratory as it died. "What? What are you?" Rodriguez answered for all of us, reloading her weapon with practiced efficiency. "We're the good guys. And you just found out what happens to monsters in our universe." The laboratory began to stabilize around us. Equipment settled back into normal positions. Gravity resumed flowing in sensible directions, and the walls stopped showing impossible vistas. The research facility was still damaged, but it was damage we could understand, could repair, could deal with. As we made our way back to the surface, I found myself walking beside the humans. no longer feeling like I needed to prove my worth as a warrior. They had taught me something more valuable than any combat technique or tactical doctrine. How long have your people known this? I asked Rodriguez as we emerged into normal sunlight that behaved like light should behave. Known what? That fear is not weakness. That courage is not the absence of terror, but the use of it. She thought about this for a moment. I guess we've always known it. We had to learn it early. Our homeworld tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Everything was bigger than us, stronger than us, more dangerous than us. The only way we survived was by being more stubborn than the things trying to eat us. Williams overheard and added, "Fear keeps you alive. It makes you pay attention, makes you careful, makes you think. But you can't let it make your decisions for you." "Fear is information," Martinez said simply. "It tells you something is dangerous. But danger and impossible are two different things. Just because something can kill you doesn't mean it will kill you." As our transport arrived to evacuate us from the planet, I realized that my understanding of warfare, of courage, of what it meant to be a warrior, had been fundamentally changed by this mission. I had entered the fight believing that superior physical capabilities and advanced weapons were the keys to victory. The humans had shown me that the most powerful weapon was the mind's ability to transform any emotion, even terror, into strength during the journey back to Coalition. 6 months into my assignment with the Joint Operations Unit, I had become something my own people would barely recognize. The rigid warrior of Veltar was gone, replaced by something more flexible, more adaptable, more human in my thinking, even while remaining alien in my physiology. My claws were still sharp, my hide still tough, my strength still formidable. But now these physical advantages were supplemented by something far more valuable: the human understanding of psychological warfare, not against enemies, but against one's own limitations. The call came during what humans called a quiet period, a time when no active operations were scheduled and we focused on training and preparation. I had been working with Sergeant First Class Thompson, a human female who specialized in what they called asymmetric warfare, learning to think like prey that refuses to accept its role in the food chain. Priority mission. Commander Hayes announced as our mixed species unit assembled in the briefing room. "We've got a situation developing in the Kepler 186 system. Colony ship Harmony's Promise went dark 3 days ago. They were carrying 15,000 civilians, mostly families relocating to the Outer Rim. The holographic display showed a massive passenger vessel, one of the largest civilian ships in the fleet. It hung motionless in space, showing no signs of damage but responding to no communications. Initial reconnaissance by the destroyer Vigilant confirmed the ship is intact but completely unresponsive. Scans indicate life signs are present but irregular." "Irregular how?" This question came from Krogtar, a Bruthan heavy weapons specialist who had joined our unit 2 months earlier. "Life signs are present but not moving. 15,000 people, all stationary, all in the same general area of the ship. It's like they're all gathered together, but not responding to external stimuli." Thompson leaned forward, her expression grim. "Sounds like another Devourer manifestation. Different pattern than Kepler 442b, but the psychological signature matches." I found myself nodding in agreement, my newly developed instincts recognizing the pattern. They have learned to adapt their methods. Direct confrontation failed, so they are trying mass psychological manipulation instead. Commander Hayes continued the briefing. "Intelligence suggests this may be a more sophisticated attack than previous encounters. Instead of feeding on individual fear, they may be creating some kind of collective terror state, keeping their victims alive but catatonic while they slowly drain them." "How long do the civilians have?" asked Silthara, one of the Jektari crystal singers who had volunteered for human combat training. "Unknown. But analysis of similar phenomena suggests days rather than weeks before permanent psychological damage occurs." The mission parameters were brutally simple. Board the ship, locate and neutralize the Devourer presence, and rescue 15,000 civilians who were trapped in some kind of collective nightmare. Oh. and do it with a 12-person mixed-species team against entities that grew stronger from fear and despair. Standard infiltration protocols, Hayes announced. But we're taking the human approach to equipment and tactics. Primitive weapons, simple technology, psychological preparation for extended engagement with fear-based entities. Over the months of training, I had watched human instructors work with alien volunteers, teaching them techniques that seemed to defy military logic. Instead of eliminating emotional responses, they taught us to recognize and redirect them. Instead of relying on superior firepower, they showed us how to make simplicity into an advantage. The transformation was not just in tactics, but in fundamental philosophy. Where I had once sought to become an unstoppable force, I now aim to become an adaptable one. Where I had once prepared for victory, I now prepared for survival and problem-solving. Under impossible conditions, the approach to Harmony's promise was tense but routine. Our small ship Defiant Resolution had been specially modified with human-designed systems that prioritized reliability over sophistication. Chemical rockets instead of quantum drives, RADIO communication instead of psychic links, kinetic weapons instead of energy beams. As we drew closer to the passenger vessel, the same electromagnetic disturbances that had plagued us on Kepler 442b began affecting our systems. But unlike previous missions, we were prepared for this. Our simple technology continued functioning while the ship's own advanced systems began reporting cascading failures. Same pattern, Thompson observed, checking her projectile rifle for the third time. They're trying to isolate us, make us dependent on ourselves rather than our equipment. Which is exactly what we've been training for, I replied, surprising myself with how naturally the human tactical philosophy now came to me. Sulthura's crystalline form resonated with nervous energy. I still do not understand how fear can be transformed into strength. My people have spent millennia learning to eliminate destructive emotions. Krogtar, who had initially been skeptical of human methods, had become one of their most effective students. Watch Martinez when we encounter the enemy, he suggested. The smaller the human gets compared to the threat, the more dangerous he becomes. Martinez himself laughed at this observation. It's not about size. It's about spite. The universe keeps trying to kill us and we refuse to cooperate. Gets to be a habit after a while. The docking with Harmony's promise was accomplished without incident. But the moment we stepped aboard, the wrongness hit us like a physical blow. The ship felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with its normal operations. The walls seemed to pulse with a rhythm that suggested breathing, and the lighting flickered in patterns that almost resembled neural activity. 15,000 people, Rodriguez muttered, consulting her scanner, all gathered in the main assembly hall. No movement, no response to stimuli. It's feeding slowly, Williams observed, taking just enough to sustain itself while keeping the victims alive for long-term consumption. We moved through the ship's corridors in the formation we had practiced dozens of times. Humans at point and rear. Aliens providing heavy firepower in the center. Everyone maintaining constant movement and communication. The ship's internal systems were partially functional but behaving erratically, with lights dimming and brightening randomly and gravity fields fluctuating just enough to be disorienting. The first direct encounter came when we reached Deck 7, the corridor ahead of us. Simply changed what had been a normal passenger ship. Passageway became something that hurt to look at directly, with walls that extended far beyond where the ship's outer hull should have been and a ceiling that seemed to curve away into impossible distances. Perceptual warfare, Thompson called out, her voice steady despite the visual assault. They're trying to disorient us, make us doubt our own senses. How do we navigate something that isn't really there? Krogtar asked, his forearms gripping his weapons as if solid reality might slip away. If he wasn't careful, the answer came from an unexpected source. Martinez simply closed his eyes and started walking forward, using his hands to trace along what should have been the left wall. Follow the human, I called out, understanding immediately. Trust touch over sight. The ship's actual structure is still there. They're just making it impossible to see. One by one, we closed our eyes and followed Martinez's lead, using our hands to navigate by the ship's true walls while our vision showed us impossible architecture. It was profoundly disturbing to walk blind through a space where our eyes insisted we should be falling into infinite voids. But our hands confirmed solid metal surfaces. This is what humans call trust but verify, Rodriguez explained as we made our way through the distorted corridors. Trust your training and preparation, but verify with independent sources of information. The psychological pressure increased dramatically as we approached the main assembly hall. Not just fear, but something deeper and more insidious. A creeping certainty that everything we were doing was futile, that we were already too late, that the civilians were beyond saving. But months of human training had taught me to recognize these thoughts as external attacks, rather than logical conclusions. The certainty felt wrong, too complete, too convenient for the enemy's purposes. Despair projection, Williams identified. They're trying to make us give up before we even try. Counter it, Hayes ordered. Human method. What followed was something that would have seemed insane to my former understanding of warfare. Instead of fighting the despair, we acknowledged it and then deliberately chose hope anyway. Okay, Martinez said cheerfully. So maybe we're too late and everyone's dead and we're all going to die horribly. But we're here, so we might as well check it out. Thompson nodded agreement. Besides, even if we fail, we'll learn something useful for the next team. Krogtar had learned this approach well. And if there is no next team, at least we will have annoyed these creatures before they kill us. The casual acceptance of potential failure, combined with stubborn determination to try anyway, seemed to confuse whatever was projecting the despair. The psychological pressure lightened noticeably as we reached the entrance to the assembly hall. What we found there defied description while simultaneously being exactly what we had expected. 15,000 human civilians stood in perfect formation in a space that should have held perhaps 3,000. They were arranged in concentratral point where something that